Welcome back to Amy Lynn Creative, where I share tips, tricks, and insights for small business owners who are wanting to grow their side hustles to full-time. Today's video, we are talking about computers, how to avoid the mistakes I made, and what computer is the best computer for designers, photographers, and videographers. Okay, that's kind of an untruth. There is no one perfect computer. I am not going to serve up one computer model that you must purchase. However, I would like to share some parameters, some things to look for, and how not to do what I did. Alright, so the first thing we want to talk about is desktop versus laptop. I hear this question all the time, and it really is up to you. A desktop means a bigger screen and generally better bang for your buck. They're usually a little bit less expensive for the same specs as a laptop. In fact, sometimes they're a lot less expensive. Versus a laptop where you have more portability and flexibility. Now, again, this comes down to your personal work style. If you are working out of a coffee shop a lot, or working while you travel a lot, or working from your couch, you want a laptop. If you work best at a desk, and you want a nice big screen because you know you'll be looking at it a lot, go for the desktop. I personally edit from a laptop or do all of my business off a laptop because I work a full-time job. And when I work a full-time job at a desk all day, the last thing I want to do when I come home is to sit down at a desk. So I work from my couch. So we've talked about the difference between laptop and desktop, but there's also a difference between laptop sizes. I wanted to show you that really quick. My two laptops. Okay, so this is the MacBook and this is the MacBook Pro. Spoiler alert, I recommend the MacBook Pro, not the MacBook. Now this is the 16-inch MacBook. I think their sizing might be different at the moment, I don't remember, but it's a really good size for me. It felt really big moving from this to this. I still keep this laptop for travel because it is much lighter, easy to fit in my bag. However, as we will discuss, this laptop has a lot of limitations. I prefer this one, and for editing, looking at this tiny, tiny screen, you can tell it is a massive, massive difference. So as far as sizing goes, I would size up. Unless you do a lot of travel, maybe go with a smaller one if you already have a desktop. But if your main computer is your laptop, definitely choose the larger one. Here's the big question. Mac versus Windows. Now, Mac integrates well between devices. So between, if you have an iPhone, an iPad, and a Mac, they all talk to each other. You can exchange files really easily through the Notes app or through AirDrop. Very, very easy and few to no virus issues, which is a really big plus. Windows tends to be less expensive and you don't need a bunch of extra dongles. When deciding whether you're going to purchase a Mac or a PC, some questions to ask yourself. Is your budget over or under $2,000? For a good, powerful MacBook Pro, you're always going to be over that $2,000 mark. So that's something to take into consideration. Do you have other Apple products that you would regularly transfer information back and forth to? Hey babe, could you turn off the air? Like, just turn it off? Turn off the air! I know! I just need you to turn it off. The next thing to consider is do you have any other Apple products, like iPhone, iPad, things that you would be transferring information back and forth to. So I have an iPhone, and because I'm posting to Instagram with it, I'm constantly sending photos back and forth from my laptop to my phone. It's very easy to do with an Apple product. What have you used in the past? Would switching be annoying? So from a learning perspective, Mac is a very different operating system. If you've always used Windows, you'll definitely want to take some learning time into account. It may be easier to just stick with a Windows product if you don't have any serious problems with it. Whatever you choose, the most important thing is what's under the hood. Honestly, Mac and Microsoft both make amazing products. You will find a great option. if you pay attention to the specifications. Hint, the Black Friday deals might not be such a great deal. So what is under the hood? All right, let's take a look. Memory is king. So memory, otherwise known as RAM, is your computer's capacity to complete certain things like photo editing or making graphics or videos. It also determines how many apps you can have open before your computer freaks out. And memory is measured in gigabytes. Similarly to the hard drive, but not to be confused with the hard drive because it is a different function. So for photography, video, and graphics, you should aim for a minimum of 32 gigs. 64 is ideal. Now 64 gets really expensive. I only have 32 on mine and it's been working really well so far. Another thing that's important to note is that a lot of Windows machines can have RAM added to them after the fact, especially if it's like a gaming computer. Macs cannot. Macs are all built in and there's no way to take them apart and add memory. There might be a desktop exception that I'm not aware of, but as far as I know, all of the MacBooks have, or all of the Mac computers do not have that option of adding extra RAM, so you want to make sure you purchase enough up front. Now let's talk about hard drive, which is often confused with memory, but it refers to how many files you can store on your computer before it fills up and refuses to turn on at all. I may or may not have played Russian roulette with my hard drive and lost. Don't be like me. If you fill it up all the way, it will not start and you will have to go through hours of panic to fix it. Don't do that. Now here's the thing. Hard drive storage to me is not quite as critical as memory. 1 terabyte's a good number to aim for. I don't have that much on this computer because I was really trying to get enough RAM and I had a certain budget. So this computer, I think I have 512 gigabytes of hard drive storage space, which isn't that much, but I also move a lot of files over to an external hard drive if I'm not working on them. So for me, it works just fine. A few other things to be aware of, graphics cards and screen specs. We could talk about those, but in general, once you get to that higher range of memory or RAM, those computers already have great specs in other areas because they're meant for heavy-duty graphics use. So like a gaming computer or a MacBook Pro, those are expected to be used for bigger, heftier projects. So they already have the right specs. I will say the Mac Retina screen tends to be I found it to be very, very accurate color-wise. My MacBook and my MacBook Pro are almost identical, and both of them match up really well with the print lab I use without any additional adjustments as far as calibrating my screen. Maybe I just got lucky, but I found that they are very, very accurate color-wise. I have had other screens to work off of a secondary screen, and I just didn't find the color to be as accurate, so I stopped using them and stuck with the screen on my MacBook Pro. All right, story time. I used to use an Apple MacBook to run my entire business from. Its intended purpose was probably travel and school. Here are its specs. All right, so 12-inch read tiny screen, 8 gigs of RAM. I cannot even tell you how frustrating this was. I used that laptop for 3 years, I think. The screen's too small, the memory situation is pathetic, and it only has 1 port, which I will talk about later. I recently upgraded to a MacBook Pro, which was the plan for a while. I actually had a MacBook Pro in college and loved it, used it for everything. I was a graphic design and then an interior design major, so I did do a lot of heavy duty stuff and it performed amazing. So I got a new MacBook Pro very recently. I actually purchased it refurbished to save some money. I have a whole nother video about that I will link up above and down below. The screen is incredible. The 16-inch size is perfect. Photo and video editing is smooth because I have 32 gigs of RAM and it has enough ports to get work done. I will talk about that in a little bit as well. Okay, let's talk about one of the main problems with my old MacBook. I don't know if you can see this. There is only 1 port here. Just 1. There are no other ports. There's a headphone jack. There's only 1 port on this MacBook. Now, memory problems aside, you can only plug 1 thing at a time into this MacBook. That means that if you have a hard drive to plug in, you can't have it plugged into power. And as this MacBook ages, you have even less battery life to get work done with. So if you need to plug in any kind of USB or anything, you can't be plugged into the power source, which is a huge problem for someone who's doing high power stuff. Now, this is a great laptop for pretty much everything except power users, like photographers, designers, videographers. You know, we are constantly using high-powered software that uses up a lot of battery, and we're often plugging a lot of things into our laptops. Enter the MacBook Pro. Not only does it solve my memory problem, look at this. It's got 2 ports here and 2 ports on the other side. Hallelujah. Hallelujah. Now, you might be saying, yeah, Amy, but it still has the stupid port that you have to have an adapter every time you use anything. I understand. However, while this used to frustrate me that I have to have an adapter, I recommend having several of these. They're very easy to misplace, by the way. Having an adapter for everything has its perks. You want to know why? Because on a Windows machine, you have a power plug, and then you have a bunch of USBs, and they're very specific. If your power jack malfunctions or breaks, this actually happened to my husband's laptop, you have no other option than to get that replaced. And by the way, it's really expensive. 1, 2, 3, 4. You have 4 options of where to plug in your power cord, which is actually really handy. If for some reason one of these ports were to fail, I would have the other 3 that had the same functionality. So I just wanted to share that as a little bonus because it used to bother me, and then I realized it's actually a huge safety net. I love my MacBook Pro so much, and I just love it.
Here's the moral of my sad tale. Do not cheap out. You will pay in tears and lost time with your loved ones, and I am not even exaggerating. Watching the spinny wheel in between photos was absolutely agonizing, and I could barely edit video at all. It was awful. Please make sure you don't cheap out. Also, if you purchase a Mac, make sure it is a MacBook Pro. I think they've recently discontinued the model of MacBook that I had. It was so bad. They discontinued it entirely. The keyboard is also going because they had a crappy keyboard. I'm not salty at all. Anyway, how to shop. So here's how to look for the right computer. Now this is an example from Best Buy's website. This is one of their search parameters. You can choose the RAM parameters, and that will significantly narrow down your search. Hint, you will most likely not find 64 gigs of RAM and 32 gigs of RAM in a Black Friday deal. It's just not going to happen. You might get lucky, but usually you're going to have to spend some money. I highly recommend, as I mentioned, I created a video about buying refurbished computers. I will link it above, but I highly recommend purchasing refurbished or open box to save some money while still getting the performance that you need from your laptop or your desktop. So you can use the search bar to narrow things down. Again, this checkbox is handy on Best Buy's website. Apple has a similar one. Oops, there was a circle there. That's fine. Anyway, now here are some specific tips for shopping Apple. Only purchase from apple.com. Highly recommend only shopping from Apple. Do get a MacBook Pro, and like I said, buy refurbished. I do recommend the Apple Care, so you get free support and repairs, and be sure to purchase several of the adapters, as I mentioned already. Here's the Windows specific side of things. Only purchase from a certified reseller, such as Best Buy, or directly from Microsoft. The Surface is similarly priced to the MacBook Pro, and I would honestly get the MacBook Pro unless you love Windows forever and ever and ever and hate Apple, and that's fine, you do you. If a deal is too good to be true, it is. Be prepared to spend $2,000 to $4,000. Now, I try to stay in that $2,500 range, especially with refurbished gear. But you could end up spending a lot more if you needed really, really intense graphics stuff for whatever you're working on. So that's why I put the range at $4,000. But usually you can stay in the $2,000 to $3,000 range if you.
Thanks so much for watching this video. If it was helpful at all, please hit the like and subscribe buttons below, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.